Today's video contains content that may be considered sensitive to some viewers, and as always, viewer discretion is advised. And if you have a story you want to send my way, please go to astheravendreams.com. And of course, thank you. A few years ago, I don't remember exactly when, my husband and I were talking about random things, and I remembered that it was mentioned that I'd never actually been camping. Like, I'd camped in my backyard as a kid, but I had never had an actual camping trip. This was apparently the wrong thing to have mentioned to him, because within the week we were making plans, or more so he was making plans, to have a camping trip within the month. He went all out on it too. He found a nearby campground that wasn't expensive, he bought all of the equipment, and he got everything ready to go in what felt like a couple of days. So, the day came for us to get on the road and get to the campground. We packed up all of our clothes and daily items, and got the stuff in the car, and headed out. I admit, I've never been much of a nature lover. As a kid, I was more into staying inside and playing my Nintendo than going out and hiking, or swimming, or whatever. Yeah, I know. That sounds like a boring childhood, but it was mine, and it was what I liked. So, needless to say, when we got to the actual campground and it was nothing but empty space and trees, I was a bit enamored. It was gorgeous. He'd found a spot that was near a small waterfall that was over a small pool of water. On top of that, it was pretty isolated, in that there were no campers anywhere near our spot. Once we got our tent set up and were confident that we were good to go, I was super excited and eager to take a hike around the area. I had brought my digital camera and wanted to get some pictures of anything and everything we could, and I absolutely did. We walked around and got a picture of some wildflowers. I got a few bird shots and even got a picture of a deer. As we were hiking, we ended up in a small section of the trees that looked like it had been recently cleared out. Like someone had been staying there in a tent or something, and had recently left. As we approached the cleared out section, the smell of something dead hit me, and hard. It didn't take me long to figure out what the smell was coming from. Nearby, we found the carcass of a deer that looked like it had been killed, bled, and then partially eaten, but then left to rot. It made me a bit sick, but my husband looked pretty angry and mentioned that it's actually illegal to leave your kills like that, and that we should go back to our spot and report it to the game warden. When we got back, I let him do all of that since I had no idea about any of it. I hopped into the tent and started going through all of my pictures that I had taken, and I was super happy with how things were going, minus the dead animal thing. After he had gotten done talking to the game warden, he mentioned that we should consider turning in since it was getting late, and I agreed. We stayed up for a little while and just kind of enjoyed each other's company. After a couple of hours, I started dozing off, so he zipped up the tent, and we decided to sleep for the night. Then, after a few hours, I was awoken by the strangest thing. Rain hitting my face. At first, I didn't think anything of it. We were out in the woods and sleeping in a tent after all. And then it hit me that, yes, we were in a tent. But the tent was sealed, and there shouldn't be any water coming in at all. My eyes shot open, and I immediately freaked out. The door to our tent was completely unzipped and open. I shook my husband awake and told him that the tent door was open. At first, he thought that we must have just left it open, and then I explained to him that I hadn't left the tent since we went to sleep, and he hadn't either. Once he sat up and realized what I was saying, he agreed that it was weird. He stepped out of the tent with our camping flashlight and looked around in the woods for anything, but then came back in and told me that there was nothing out there. We both just kind of had to accept it for what it was, and we confirmed that nothing was missing, so it was just a weird situation. Well, it got weirder. In the morning, after we were fully awake and had eaten breakfast, I decided I wanted to show him some of the pictures that I had taken the day before on our hike. I turned on my camera, and I went to the pictures, which immediately takes you to the last picture that was taken. There, on the screen, was a picture of myself and my husband sleeping in the tent. The timestamp was around 2 in the morning on the night before, which seriously scared the hell out of me. I immediately showed him the picture and mentioned the whole tent door being open thing. I was panicking. He, of course, told me to calm down, and then I told him that whoever it was that had opened our tent was able to reach past me, grab my camera, and take a picture of us without me noticing. My camera was right by my head. I don't think the weight of what could have happened really hit him, but it was definitely apparent to me. If this person was any more of a psycho, I likely would have been dead. At my request, we ended up packing up all of our stuff and heading out to the office for the campgrounds to file a report. They took the info, and then probably did nothing with it. But at least they were aware of the situation. That was the one and only time that I have ever been camping, and I don't think I will ever feel comfortable doing it again. Mostly because I don't know if this person had malicious intent, or if this was just some dumb prank or something. Either way, it really scared the living hell out of me. This story happened back when I was in college, around 1998. I went to school on a converted military base. The base was shut down and a small part of it was now a campus. This means that there were a lot of back roads, etc., that were essentially abandoned, other than the local and military police that still patrolled the site. I lived in a small apartment on the base, converted office quarters, and my girlfriend at the time was house-sitting about a half-hour away. Near 1 a.m., she called me and woke me up, panicked, because she thought she heard someone walking around outside of the house, and asked me to come stay with her. I was worried, so I got up, threw some clothes on, and got moving. There was a way to save some time by cutting through the abandoned parts of the base, sort of a shortcut, and since I was in a hurry, this seemed like the best way. There was no power to this part of the base, so the streetlights weren't working. It was pitch black aside from the light from my headlights. I'm on this back road and suddenly I see flashing lights. I'm being pulled over. Granted, I was speeding. I was in a hurry. But I was also speeding sort of in the middle of nowhere. I pull over. The officer gets out, does the standard license and registration. I hand it over, and I tell him about my phone call, and I was just wanting to make sure my girlfriend was safe. He goes back to his car and just sits there. Just sitting. A few minutes later, another police car pulls up. Through the rear view mirror reflection, I could see them talking and staring at me. Finally, the new officer comes up to my car and says, "Get out of the car." I ask him why, and he just repeats the order. Now that I'm out of the car, I realize both cars had 2 officers in them. So it's me and 4 police officers. They have me stand to the side while they start searching my car. One of them turns to me and says, "You seem to be in a big hurry in the middle of the night. What were you running from?" I was kind of shocked at the accusation, but I told him the story that I had said to the first officer about my girlfriend's call. He turns away. The next officer tells me my car is pretty nice, and by how late it was and how fast I was driving, it seems like I stole it. This was odd, and I pointed out the registration and my license all match. The officers start talking again. One stands by me as the other 3 group together. Then, out of nowhere, 2 more cars and 4 more officers show up. Keep in mind, this is on a deserted road at around 1:30 a.m. with no lights. The 7 of them start talking while an officer stays with me. One goes back to my car and pulls out a bag of tortillas that I assume fell out of a grocery bag earlier that day. He then looks at the other officer and says, "This kid was speeding in the middle of the night with food and supplies in his car. Sounds like someone who did something and needed to get away and hide for a while." At this point, I'm both scared and mad at the absurdity of what is happening. Not to mention, still worried about the call from my girlfriend. They all look at me waiting for a reply, and I don't really know what to say. Finally, one officer says, "You see the wear on these tires? This wear is from someone who does a lot of high-speed driving. You must like to speed, huh?" So I say, "Yep, all the freaking time," angrily. And at that moment, I wished I could grab the words and take them back. The officer's face froze like this was the moment he'd been waiting for. He looked at the other 7 police, and then went back to his car and opened the trunk. I have no idea why. The officer who was standing near me then asked, "Where are you from?" I replied, "Marin County." Another officer hears me and says, "Oh, that's the town of Barbara Boxer, but I won't hold that too much against you." Boxer was a senator. I wish I could say I planned this, but out of my incredibly nervous mouth flew, "Yeah, Diana Feinstein too. She's my neighbor." Feinstein was a senator at that point. The truth was we lived near each other and I met her once, but that was it. The trunk cop overhears, "What did that kid say?" The officer next to me says, "The kid says he's neighbors with Feinstein." They all pause and look at each other. Trunk officer closes his trunk, comes up to me and gets in my face and says, "Get the hell out of here." I get back in my car. The whole episode took 45 minutes. I drove to a main roadway and finally got to my girlfriend, who was also worried because a 30-minute drive had taken me over an hour. We didn't have cell phones then. I still have no idea what was going on or what would have happened if my nervous mouth had not just blabbed that out. This story is 100% true, and a friend of mine is actually the reason I finally realized how serious this was and decided to post the story. And that part is at the end, but here goes. So, I was talking to an old friend of mine who told me that a mutual acquaintance we had, but a man that she thought was a friend, had sexually assaulted her. I told her how sorry I was and that stats say it's not usually a random guy, It's a person you're familiar with. But then, there are other times. Times like this. So, my girlfriend and I go to a pool hall and are drinking and playing pool. We happen to find the only other couple there and link up. Pretty soon, it's obvious my girlfriend is way too drunk for a low-key place like this, so we leave with them. Before we drove to the other place, we stupidly drank more tequila with them. The new place has a much smaller front part of the bar, but the back area is spacious and leads to a back alley. The drunkenness is creeping up on my girlfriend, and she's getting more sloppy by the minute, almost. I go to take a pee, and as I come back, I see the couple we met and had come to this place with in a corner, kind of looking at me and then looking in my girlfriend's direction. She's found 2 other young women to talk to, but now also 2 men have come up to her, and one even has his arm around her. I stay calm. Cooler heads always prevail. I walk up. "Hey, baby." And then she's like, "Hey, baby," all drunk. And the man that had his arm around her that she was oblivious to now removed his arm. But when he did, he and his friend made eye contact and nodded, ever so slightly. I'm eyeballing both of them and can tell they've barely spoken to the other girls who already had drinks in their hands. And they offer to get us drinks. Us, as in the table. Again, the other girls have drinks. I try to decline, but my sloshed girlfriend is thinking it's nice. One guy comes back with a drink for me and one for my girl. Nobody else was given drinks by these men. He hands my girlfriend hers first, and then me mine. As she starts to lift her lips, I put my hand over it and whisper, "You've had enough. You're done." Then, as both these creeps look at me raise my cup, I obviously drop it right on the guy's shoe who gave it to me, and go, "Oops." Not that I'm sorry, not my bad, just strong, unwavering eye contact, an icy tone, and the word, "oops." And that's it. And he looks me right into my eyes and says, "Huh, it's okay. I'll get you another one." With the most sinister look that I have ever seen. We both knew what him and his friends, or relative, were doing. They looked alike, but more on that later. So I then grabbed my girlfriend's hand very hard and said, "We're leaving, now." And she starts to protest, and I grab her arm so hard that, had she not been drunk, she would have yelped in pain and growled in her ear, "If you try to make a scene, I'm going to pull out my knife and kill anyone that tries to separate us. I will pick you up and run. We have to leave now, baby. Trust me." And she kind of just understood through her drunk state how serious I was. I was so scared that she was gonna cause a scene, have the bouncer toss me, and be alone with those wolves. I was scared of us getting separated. We got home safe, and I cried. I remember that last 100-foot walk to the car in the dark, holding her up. I was glad we didn't ingest any of the drinks that we were offered that were clearly spiked with something. Now, back to before. This happened in the town of Lodi, California. Small town. I didn't recognize, nor did these men seem to know anyone. Both were Arabic, well-dressed, and decent-looking. So I tell my friend this, and she gasps. The neighboring town, Stockton, had the same thing happen. A lot. And successfully. At this one bar called Rooftops on Sundays. They had flyers warning people about them, and a description too. There was a Facebook page dedicated to identifying these men, and a hotline for tips. These guys were pure evil. They were going to drug us, toss me, and do God knows what else to my sweetheart. I shudder thinking about if I had been just a little more drunk, a little more off, or less sharp that night, what could have happened. When I was in my early 20s, I had an apartment right off a major road adjacent to a gas station. They had this deal where you pay $10 for a cup and get free refills for a year. I love unsweetened iced tea, and they actually kept theirs fresh. I got to know the staff pretty well, and I went probably once or twice a day. They even gave me an award for favorite customer, which was crazy sweet. One day, I was tipsy with a friend, going for more beer, and there was a man with a super cute puppy. We asked if we could pet it, and the little monster just jumped into my arms, and my beer-warmed heart melted. He tells me the dog is blah blah certified. It was a flea-encrusted mutt, but I loved him. So he would sell him to me for $800. After letting him know that I couldn't afford a dog, and then thanking him for letting me play, I tried to set the bugger down, but it cried and clawed its way back on me for kisses. Jokingly, I said, well, I guess he chose me. I took 2 exaggerated and slow steps away, and then asked him to help get the noodly puppy so I could wander off to Beer Town. Sad to leave my new furry soulmate, but didn't think anything negative about it until the next day or two. I go to get tea, and I say hello to my friend, the cashier, and when she starts freaking out. The puppy-selling guy had come in and interrogated the woman about who I am and where I lived. He came back with a video camera to record her, and then he called the cops to report me or force them to give up my super secret identity. Meanwhile, I was literally in eye view on my second-story balcony, smoking cigarettes and cramming like 6 people on my tiny ledge. The cops left because he's obviously unbalanced, and he was forced to leave as well. That wouldn't stop our hero of the story, though. He was fighting for his puppy's welfare after I ruthlessly tried to steal him and, I don't know, eat him? Maybe my kisses were menacing? He had a very noticeable truck. It had a camper on the back covered in palms and creepy Jesus conspiracy BS painted on the actual truck. He would park outside and await my return. The staff all bonded together and didn't know me where I lived or anything about the ginger biatch. I would check out my window before rushing in to get updates, and truly thought that he would move on. One night, at 3 a.m., someone starts pounding on my door. I call the cops. Palm truck is in my driveway but gone when the cops arrive. I ask to put a restraining order, but apparently a vague description of a describable truck is not enough. 3 a.m. the next night, the nights after that, I get a letter. But I kid you not, it's written on the back of a Bud Light lime box. It offers me a white kitten and college tuition if I give this anonymous novelist a call. I had a tuxedo cat that loved to sit in the window and scream. So, I brought the Bud Light offer to the police station, and one guy was in tears laughing, as was I, while apologizing because he knew how terrified I was, but it was a super freaking awkward situation. I had 2 police cruisers parked outside my house for a good month. It was a good spot downtown to await danger anyway. And then one day, there was a half-naked man stabbing a tree in my yard, and the same cops showed up and pointed at me on my second-story balcony laughing, and came up and had a beer after his shift. Life is weird. So, I was visiting my girlfriend this weekend, and it was around 3 a.m. when we decided to nip outside for a smoke. When we have a cigarette, we usually stand in an alleyway by the side of her house to be out of the way. Well, I usually stand on one side so I can have a view of the environment. In order to move out of the way, or if there's anything that could be a danger to us, like animals, scooters, etc. So, we're talking, when suddenly on the main road to my right, I spot a shadow of a person walking past. Or at least it looked like a shadow, as it was an individual dressed all in black, a large black carry-all backpack, and a black face covering with their hood up. I could tell they had on a face covering, as they kept turning their head left and right as they walked past, showing only a partial amount of pale skin, masked in black. I think nothing of this until around 2 minutes later, the same person walked back the way they originally passed from, only more observant and hurried in a slight jog. This wasn't the first time I've experienced something like this, as around 3 years ago, I was living at my grandparents'. It was around 3 a.m., and I went downstairs to get a drink. In their house, they had a habit of only partially closing the kitchen blinds, leaving around a third of the window still viewable. I noticed a strange light gleaming in from the window, so I decided to look through. Big mistake. Looking back at me, in my neighbor's garden was a man in a black balaclava, wearing all black with his hood up and wearing a black backpack. The light which I had seen was an intruder light which had activated as he was trying to break into their kitchen. My grandparents and the neighbor's garden were separated by a small brick wall, as the gardens and homes were joined, a terrace property. So I blinked, and he was still staring at me. He was as still as anything, probably afraid that he had been caught. I tried discreetly calling the police on my mobile, as I also tried to put my shoes on to apprehend the individual. But, as I approached the back door, he'd vanished. Shortly, the police arrived and searched every garden in the entire area, but he was gone. Amazingly, as the garden walls which separated the gardens from the alleyway were huge. A couple of weeks later, at around 4:30 a.m., I was making my way out of my grandparents' home to work, approaching the usual pathway and alleyway to the metro link, when a man, same description, stopped me and told me, "Hey, have you got a phone? There's a fire in that alleyway." He got pretty close to me. I told him I didn't have a phone, and then he said, "I didn't start it," but had a lighter in his hand. He was also wearing a full-faced balaclava. I kept walking. He walked the other way and was staring at me as he walked. He then began to run as I approached the alleyway. And he wasn't lying, as a large bin had been set on fire. I went into my local shop and got some stuff to extinguish the fire, extinguished it as best as I could, and then called the emergency services. Police and fire arrived. I'm still not sure if they ever caught this guy, but I'm certain that it was the same guy. Seeing this other wanderer in black and brought back this memory, and I thought I would share it with you all. It was super creepy to look out my window at 3 a.m. and have someone staring back at me. To start this off, I'm 16 years old and a girl, but my body and personality have always been much older than I am. This took place when I was about 10, right after my mom had went to jail again, and it's not the only bad thing to have happened to me. In fact, my very religious and superstitious family believes that I was just born with bad luck, but this takes the cake. My mother had been dating who we will call Adam for quite a while, and my sister loved him, but me being young and protective of my mother, I did not. I'd always been told that I look just like my mom, and I never believed people until now, but the day it happened was a week after she had just went back to prison for violating parole and being found in possession of narcotics. Adam had come home begging my grandmother to let him take me out for ice cream, claiming that my mother had told him he could. We had later found out that this was not true. My grandmother was going to let him, but I had no intention on going with him, and even told him to go screw himself, much to my grandmother's displeasure, so I wasn't allowed to go for cursing. All the entire month after that, he would show up at my school during lunch to bring me food, which I wouldn't eat, and then told my teachers I was to go home with him, not on the school bus. So I snuck on the bus with my friend, and even showed up at our field trip to another state for 4 days. But that is where it all happened. While waiting in line for food, a cop car came speeding up to the picnic area, and quickly 2 police officers had actually tackled Adam. It turns out that he had done things to, and gotten rid of 2 little girls around my age there, and admitted to wanting to do the same to me. My family now respects my bad feelings about people, and I dropped out of public school after a few girls from my grade found out about it. They would taunt me and call my mother all kinds of names, and, well, when you have the height and strength of a middle schooler at 10, it was easy for me to lose my temper, and I'd gotten in loads of trouble. So remember that sometimes that gut feeling about people can be right. So this was day 2 of 5 of this week's all-week-long True Scary Story Winter Solstice Christmas Holiday Celebration. I don't think that's the name, I just made that up as I spoke. I don't know what I'm calling it, it's just 5 days of True Scary Stories. It's gonna be good stuff. This was day 2 of 5, like I said. This was creepy encounters and stalker stories, a very popular topic, as has grown throughout the year, and yeah. Genuinely appreciate the people who let me read their stories, especially these ones. I know there's a bit of a sensitive aspect to them, so thank you to all of them, and thank you to everyone who has submitted a story to me. Always appreciated. If you enjoyed the video, please do hit that thumbs up button. You can also subscribe to the channel if you're new and like what you heard, or if you're not new, don't resubscribe, because that'll unsubscribe, and unsubscribing is bad. That's right. If you want to support the channel further, leave me a comment, tell the algorithm how much you love my videos. You can literally say, hey algorithm, I love this video. That'd be awesome. I don't know if that would actually do anything. In fact, that might tell YouTube it's spam. I don't know. YouTube does weird stuff. If you want to support further, you can go to patreon.com/astheravendreams or hit join down below, where as little as 99 cents a month, you can get access to all my content early. As long as I'm ahead, you win. That's how it works. Higher tiers get more stuff, but you can go check that out as you check out the tiers on the pages and all that. Anyways, much love, friends. I hope you're all having a beautiful day, and I hope you're ready for the rest of the week, because tomorrow we got paranormal, then true scary stories, then Christmas stories, so that's how things go. All that said, I love you. I hope you're having a great week, and I hope I'll see you next time. But until then, sleep well.